Tonight, we are witnessing the most dangerous escalation in modern military history, a development that has fundamentally altered the global balance of power, a development that brings the world closer to catastrophic war than at any moment since the Cuban Missile Crisis. China has just completed a massive military cargo shipment to Iran. The contents: 3,500 hypersonic missiles and 500 intercontinental ballistic missiles, weapons that can strike any target on Earth, weapons that cannot be intercepted by any existing defense system, weapons that, in Iran's hands, transform the strategic landscape overnight. And accompanying this shipment, a warning from Beijing so explicit, so unambiguous, that it cannot be misunderstood. Any wrong step by the United States and China will join the war. This is not diplomacy. This is not posturing. This is China drawing a line and daring America to cross it. Tonight, we examine what has been delivered, what it means, how the world is responding, and whether humanity stands on the brink of World War III. The shipment arrived in two waves over the past 72 hours. Intelligence agencies tracked the movement from the moment the first cargo aircraft departed Chinese military bases in Xinjiang and Sichuan provinces. The scale was immediately alarming. These were not the Y-20 transport aircraft that have carried previous shipments. These were a combination of military cargo planes and what analysts believe were specially configured civilian freighters pressed into service to carry loads that exceeded normal military transport capacity. The first wave landed at Mehrabad Air Base near Tehran. The second wave arrived at a newly constructed facility near Isfahan base that Western intelligence had been monitoring but whose purpose had remained unclear. Now its purpose is unmistakably clear. It was built to receive exactly this kind of shipment. The weapons began being unloaded immediately. Iranian military personnel, working alongside what sources describe as Chinese technical advisors, transferred the cargo to waiting trucks and transporters. The missiles disappeared into the Iranian interior, dispersed across the country to locations that even now are being mapped by American and Israeli intelligence. But mapping them is not the same as stopping them, and the weapons now in Iranian hands cannot be stopped by any means currently available. The contents of this shipment represent a revolution in Iranian military capability. Let me be precise about what was delivered. First, 3,500 hypersonic missiles. These are not ordinary weapons. Hypersonic missiles travel at speeds exceeding Mach 5 times the speed of sound. Some variants can reach Mach 10 or beyond. At these velocities, existing missile defense systems cannot intercept them. The reaction time is too short, the guidance adjustments are too rapid, the physics simply do not allow interception. The missiles reportedly delivered include variants of Chinese DF-17, a weapon specifically designed to defeat advanced missile defenses, as well as the DF-27 and newer systems that have never been publicly acknowledged. 3,500 of these weapons, dispersed across Iran, create a strike capability that no nation can defend against. Every American base in the Middle East is now vulnerable. Every Israeli city is now vulnerable. Every Gulf state capital, every oil facility, every naval vessel within range, all vulnerable, and the defenses that were supposed to protect them useless. Second, 500 intercontinental ballistic missiles. This is the component that has Washington in emergency session. ICBMs are strategic weapons designed to carry nuclear warheads across continents. Iran has never possessed ICBMs. Its longest-range missiles could reach perhaps 2,000 kilometers, enough to threaten Israel and Gulf states, but not Europe, and certainly not the continental United States. That limitation no longer exists. The ICBMs delivered reportedly include variants of Chinese DF-31 and DF-41 weapons with ranges exceeding 12,000 kilometers. With these missiles, Iran can reach any point on Earth: New York, Washington, Los Angeles, London, Paris, Berlin, all within range. Iran does not currently possess nuclear warheads for these missiles, but the missiles themselves are now present. And the question of what warheads they might eventually carry haunts every strategic planner in the Western world. China's warning accompanied the shipment, delivered through multiple channels to ensure it could not be ignored. The Chinese Foreign Ministry issued a formal statement. The People's Republic of China reserves the right to assist its strategic partners in matters of legitimate self-defense. Any military action by the United States or its allies against the Islamic Republic of Iran will be considered an attack on Chinese interests. China will respond accordingly. The phrase respond accordingly is diplomatic language, but accompanying communications delivered through back channels to American officials were more explicit. According to sources familiar with the messages, China stated directly, if the United States attacks Iran, China will enter the conflict. This is not a warning. This is a commitment. The implications are staggering. China has formally tied its military response to American action against Iran. An attack on Tehran is now, in Beijing's framing, equivalent to an attack on China itself. The mutual defense pact that analysts long speculated might exist has been revealed not through diplomatic announcement but through action and explicit threat. The American response was immediate and intense. The president convened an emergency National Security Council meeting that extended through the night. The Pentagon activated crisis protocols not used since September 11, 2001. Intelligence agencies redirected resources from every other priority to assess the scope of what had been delivered, and military commanders across the Pacific and Middle East began updating contingency plans that now must account for the possibility of fighting China and Iran simultaneously. The world has not been this close to great power war since 1962. Let me walk through exactly what these weapons mean in practical military terms. The hypersonic missiles transform Iran's offensive capability completely. Previously, Iran possessed ballistic missiles that followed predictable trajectories. They were dangerous but counterable. Patriot batteries, THAAD systems, and Israel's Arrow could intercept them with reasonable reliability. Hypersonic missiles defeat those defenses. They fly at lower altitudes than traditional ballistic missiles, reducing detection time. They maneuver unpredictably, making interception calculations impossible. They arrive so quickly that defensive systems cannot react. 3,500 of these weapons give Iran the capacity to conduct saturation attacks that no defense can stop. Consider what this means for American forces. There are approximately 45,000 American military personnel stationed across the Middle East. At bases in Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. Each of those bases is now targetable by weapons that cannot be intercepted. An Iranian strike could, in theory, eliminate American military presence in the region in a matter of hours. The casualties would be catastrophic: tens of thousands of Americans killed in a single coordinated attack. This is not hyperbole. This is the mathematics of hypersonic warfare. For Israel, the implications are existential. Israel's missile defense Iron Dome, David's Sling, Arrow has been the foundation of its security doctrine. That foundation has just been undermined. Hypersonic missiles approaching Israeli cities will penetrate those defenses. Some will be stopped. Many will not. A full-scale Iranian attack with hypersonic weapons could cause casualties that Israel has never experienced: civilian deaths in the thousands, potentially tens of thousands. The ICBMs add a strategic dimension that is even more alarming. These weapons can reach Europe and the continental United States. Even without nuclear warheads, ICBMs carrying conventional payloads represent an unprecedented threat. With nuclear warheads, which Iran may eventually develop or obtain, they represent existential danger to Western civilization itself. The strategic calculus has changed completely, and here is where we must understand what is driving China's extraordinary decision. This is not merely about Iran, this is about the global order. China has concluded that confrontation with the United States is inevitable. The question is not whether competition will intensify, but how and when. By arming Iran so massively, China accomplishes multiple strategic objectives. First, strategic distraction. Every American asset committed to the Middle East is an asset not available for the Pacific. China's core interests lie in Taiwan, the South China Sea, and the broader Indo-Pacific region. By creating a crisis in the Middle East, one that demands massive American attention and resources, China reduces American capacity to respond to Chinese actions elsewhere. Iran becomes a strategic weight, tying down American power far from the theaters that matter most to Beijing. Second, deterrence establishment. China has now demonstrated that it will provide advanced weapons to American adversaries without restraint. This changes the calculation for every nation considering alignment with the United States. If America's enemies can obtain Chinese weapons capable of defeating American defenses, what is American protection worth? Alliances built on the assumption of American military superiority become less reliable. Nations may hedge, seeking accommodation with China rather than confrontation. Third, escalation leverage. By explicitly threatening to join any conflict, China has given Iran an umbrella of protection. An American attack on Iran is no longer a regional action, it is potentially the opening of World War III. This creates enormous pressure on Washington to avoid military action, regardless of what Iran does. Iran can now act more aggressively, confident that American retaliation risks global catastrophe. Fourth, precedent destruction. The arms control architecture that has limited proliferation for decades is finished. If China will provide ICBMs to Iran, it will provide them to anyone. North Korea, Venezuela, Syria, any nation willing to challenge American interests. The world is entering an era of unrestrained weapons proliferation, and the consequences of that era are terrifying to contemplate. The scale of this transfer exceeds anything in modern military history. 3,500 hypersonic missiles. This is not a symbolic gesture. This is an arsenal. For comparison, the United States currently possesses fewer than 100 operational hypersonic weapons. Development programs are accelerating, but mass production is years away. China has just given Iran 35 times America's current hypersonic inventory, 500 intercontinental ballistic missiles. Russia's entire deployed ICBM force numbers approximately 300 missiles. China has provided Iran with more ICBMs than Russia maintains for its own defense. Iran has transformed overnight from a regional missile power into a strategic nuclear threshold state. The logistics of the transfer itself demonstrate Chinese commitment. Moving this quantity of weapons required dozens of flights over multiple days. It required ground transportation networks prepared in advance. It required integration teams, Chinese personnel who will remain in Iran to ensure the weapons can be operated effectively. This is not a one-time sale, this is a strategic partnership expressed in hardware. China is now invested in Iranian military capability in ways that cannot be easily reversed. Their fates are linked, and that linkage makes the crisis all the more dangerous. History offers limited parallels for what is unfolding. The closest comparison is the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. In that crisis, the Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, bringing weapons capable of striking American cities within minutes of launch. The world came closer to nuclear war than at any other moment in history. That crisis was resolved through a combination of military pressure and diplomatic compromise. The Soviets withdrew the missiles. The Americans pledged not to invade Cuba and quietly removed missiles from Turkey. But the current situation differs in critical ways. The weapons have already arrived. They cannot be interdicted. They are dispersed across Iran, hidden in locations that will take months to identify. The genie cannot be returned to the bottle, and the threatening power is not a declining Soviet Union but a rising China, confident, capable, and explicitly willing to fight. The resolution mechanisms that worked in May 1962 not work today. There is no face-saving withdrawal available. There is no quiet quid pro quo that addresses the fundamental issue. The weapons exist, they are in Iran, they will remain, and the world must now live with the consequences. What makes this moment so dangerous is the pressure bearing down on every decision-maker. The United States faces an impossible situation. Allow the weapons to remain and accept a fundamental shift in the global balance of power. Iran becomes untouchable. American allies become indefensible. Decades of strategic investment become worthless. But act militarily and risk war with China, a war that could escalate to nuclear exchange, a war that could end civilization as we know it. There is no good option, only degrees of catastrophe. Israel faces existential calculation. The weapons now in Iran can destroy the Jewish state, not might destroy, can destroy. Israeli leaders must decide whether to strike before those weapons become fully operational, knowing that such a strike might trigger the very attacks they fear. Or they must accept that their security now depends on Iranian restraint, a bet that few in Jerusalem are willing to make. The pressure toward preemptive action is immense, but preemption risks the very destruction it seeks to prevent. Iran faces its own pressures. The weapons provide security but also temptation. Hardliners who have long advocated confrontation now have the means to pursue it. The restraint that characterized Iranian behavior based on military inferiority may disappear now that inferiority has been erased. New capabilities can produce new behaviors, and new behaviors can produce disasters. The official American response has been unprecedented in its urgency. The president addressed the nation from the Oval Office in remarks that were simultaneously alarming and deliberately measured. He said, "The American people should know that we are aware of significant military developments in the Middle East. These developments represent a serious challenge to international stability and to the security of our allies and our own forces." He continued, "I want to be clear. The United States will not be intimidated. We will protect our interests. We will defend our allies. And we will take whatever action is necessary to ensure the safety of the American people." He concluded, "But I also want to be clear that we seek no conflict with any nation. The path of diplomacy remains open. We urge all parties to step back from actions that could lead to catastrophe." The speech was meant to reassure allies and warn adversaries, but observers noted the absence of specific actions, clear red lines, or concrete responses. The administration is still formulating its approach. And in the meantime, the weapons remain in Iran, the threat remains active, and the world remains on edge. Chinese President Xi Jinping addressed the situation in remarks carried by state media. He declared, "China will not stand by while its partners are threatened with destruction. The era when certain powers could bomb and invade at will is over. The balance of power has shifted. Those who fail to recognize this shift do so at their peril." He continued, "China seeks peace. But China will not purchase peace through submission. If war is forced upon us, we will fight and we will win." And he concluded, "Let this be a message to those who threaten our friends. An attack on Iran is an attack on the international order that China will defend. Consider your actions carefully. The consequences of miscalculation would be beyond imagination." The speech was a declaration of alliance, explicit, unambiguous, and binding. China has cast its lot with Iran. Whatever happens next, Beijing has committed itself to Tehran's defense, and that commitment transforms every calculation. About conflict in the Middle East. The implications of this transfer extend far beyond the immediate military balance. If China will provide ICBMs to Iran, the precedent is established. North Korea, already nuclear-armed but with limited delivery systems, could receive similar transfers. Venezuela, long hostile to American influence, could become a platform for Chinese weapons in the Western Hemisphere. Syria, Myanmar, Cuba, any nation willing to align with Beijing against Washington could receive capabilities that fundamentally alter their strategic position. The non-proliferation architecture that has limited the spread of advanced weapons for decades is collapsing. Treaties that constrained behavior are becoming irrelevant. Norms that prevented the worst outcomes are eroding. The world is entering an era of unrestrained competition, great powers arming their allies without limit, capabilities spreading to actors who would previously have been denied them. This is the world China is creating, and it is a world far more dangerous than the one we have known. Analysts are now considering scenarios that were previously confined to worst-case planning. The first possibility is strategic accommodation. The United States accepts the new reality, adjusts its posture, and avoids actions that might trigger Chinese intervention. This preserves peace but concedes the strategic shift. The second possibility is limited action. The United States or Israel conducts strikes against the delivered weapons, gambling that China will not follow through on its threat. This risks catastrophic escalation but might reverse the transfer. The third possibility is regional war. Conflict erupts whether by design or miscalculation but remains contained to the Middle East. Casualties are massive, but great power direct conflict is avoided. The fourth possibility is global war. Escalation spirals beyond control. Chinese forces engage American forces. The conflict expands to the Pacific. Nuclear use becomes possible. Each scenario carries different probabilities. None of them are acceptable, and the choice between them may not be ours to make. What we are witnessing is a test of the international order, an order built on American military dominance, an order that assumed no rival could challenge American power projection, an order that is now being dismantled piece by piece, missile by missile. China is testing whether that order can survive direct challenge. The answer will shape the next century. If America backs down, the message is clear. Chinese power can override American interests anywhere China chooses. If America escalates, the message is different, but the consequences may be worse. Great power conflict with all that implies. There is no outcome that preserves the world as it was. The test has been set. The answer is being written in real time. In the hours since the transfer was confirmed, developments have accelerated. American forces across the Middle East have been placed on the highest alert status. Aircraft have been dispersed from primary bases to reduce vulnerability. Naval vessels have moved to defensive positions. Additional Patriot and THAAD batteries are being rushed to the region, though their effectiveness against hypersonic missiles is questionable. Israel has mobilized reserve forces and placed its nuclear-capable Jericho missiles on alert, a signal that Jerusalem is prepared to escalate to the ultimate level if its survival is threatened. Gulf states have requested emergency consultations. Saudi Arabia has reportedly reached out to China through back channels, seeking reassurance that it will not be targeted. The diplomatic scramble is intense. Every nation in the region is recalculating its position. Alliances that seemed solid are being questioned. Commitments that seemed reliable are being doubted. The order that provided stability for decades is fracturing, and no one knows what will replace it. As we assess this moment of maximum danger, certain truths must be acknowledged. The world has changed. The assumption of American military dominance that underpinned international relations for 30 years is no longer valid. China has demonstrated the will and the capability to arm American adversaries with weapons that neutralize American advantages. Iran now possesses an arsenal that makes it untouchable by conventional military action, and the threat of great power war hangs over every decision. We do not know how this crisis will resolve. We do not know if war can be avoided. We do not know if the institutions and relationships that have prevented catastrophe will hold. But we know that the stakes have never been higher. The decisions made in the coming days and weeks will determine whether we navigate this crisis successfully or whether we descend into a conflict that could consume civilization itself. Let us hope that wisdom prevails. Let us pray that restraint overcomes provocation, and let us prepare for whatever comes next.